Welcome in. It's been a while, but tonight's the right night to get back into the swing of things. Welcome in to another episode of the Rochford Files with your host. That's kind of between the coast. This is Andrew Rochford, come to you live from the Mile Highland City. And there's a lot to catch up on. Since the last time I did a live stream previously on another Sunday. Couldn't get any damn mics to work at one point. But fortunately, it was just a weird hiccup that time. And it's just been a inconsistency issue on my part to be live more often. Because y'all know the goal is 2 to 3 times a week on my end. And please start off by liking the stream, share it where you can, try to get some new people in on the channel as I'm live right now on Twitch and YouTube. So I think it's a good time to start off with like the main story. The top thing that got the most attention over the past week with the Biden signing the order for the 10K of student debt relief, which is really a slap in the face once again. However, there was one little surprise thing that I don't think many of us expected was if you have Pell Grants, that could get you as much as 10K canceled in your debt. So I'm going to guess if you only got like a few $100s or so, that it would just be the amount of Pell Grants you ever got and not automatically another 10K just for getting any type of Pell Grant. But what else? Some other stuff we'll talk about is the Mark Zuckerberg and the Facebook FBI cover-up. Then we'll work in some more stuff when it comes to what they're doing overseas. More money to Ukraine, as we all know. They're now also a little attack on Syria. So, pretty easy to work this stuff in to many of the several topics we talk about. Then got some sports stuff to work in with that. Matt Araiza. It took a bit of like public outrage for the Bills to make the decision to release him, so we'll talk more about that. Stephen A. Smith is now going to start his own non-sports podcast. Colin Cowherd had something interesting to react to on fake news. Then I got like 3 different local stories over the past week. A couple of them related to propaganda and another like college speech issue. So there's a lot to go into tonight on the Rochford Files. Just a little after 7 p.m. Eastern on the East Coast. A little after 5 p.m. in the Mountain Zone here. Hey, Kelly, happy Sunday to you as well. Thank you, and hope that your family is doing well too. And now let's just get started. I'm sure WCSN will be in soon. So there was just so much stuff. So usually when I feel like there's an overwhelming amount of things that get posted, it's just easiest to go with the search and just work your way from that. So I think I'm just going to do a little refresh since it's been a few hours since I put this search up on the screen. And Tim Ryan did a little interview on CNN this morning, pitting the student debt argument uh, against the tax and interest rate stuff. Nicely done. We can use more greenhouses in our world and help with the environment and whatnot. Since I know that he does sound like the gardening type, so. Let's see where we go from here. Mainly trying to find the parts of the conservative outrage rather than here's one. A few days ago from Matt Walsh. There is no such thing as student loan forgiveness. There is only student loan transferal where the debt is transferred to the person who took out the loan to someone else who did not. Okay, I think I know why I'm not getting quite the good results. But yeah, that's a really extremely tired talking point, especially when we don't get a say in military funding. We do not get a say in police funding. And as I've gone on in the past, we know that there is no comparison between the two. Because we got powerful people who will not ask for our approval when it comes time for us, the people, to get some type of relief, even if it's minuscule relief, because that's all that 10K really is. And it's really not going to have the effect that it should. I think I'm going to switch over to some recent retweets of mine because I feel like those have some greater points to that are definitely more effective here. So if you're new here, this is the Twitter at NugLifeComrade. Click the follow button because I did quite a few retweets when this first came out. You see, this is why we should not accept, we should not be applauding this whole 10K bullshit. Look at the absurd amounts of billions and billions of dollars Ukraine has got. So we've gone from quantitative easing for all student loan debt 6 years ago to measly 10K now. Yeah, that's as sad as its state of is as it is. And actually, even though I used to think that Joe Biden only promised 10K, he actually did uh, fail to meet his own initial campaign promise on that. And Brianna Joy Gray with the receipts as usual on that. Yes, Biden proposed full debt forgiveness for students of HBCUs and public colleges on the campaign trail. The proposal was limited to those making less than $125,000 per year. Biden promoted it as early as April 2020 and referenced it sparingly throughout the campaign. And if you've paid attention to his campaign, you would notice how quickly he would water down or completely abandon even the merely 10K type of things. As we saw with the public option, he abandoned talking about public option a few weeks before the election. So there was a lot. Hey, Leah Neely, I would rather not get the 10K than have to report it to the government in that way. Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're just giving you this false hope of temporary relief to reline up their pockets once again. And they don't do it in a way that's beneficial or anything like that. And Primo Radical summed it up well with the problem with only getting 10K. $10,000 of student loan forgiveness is an insult to millions of Americans who have exponentially more debt for the crime of getting an education. Many accumulate over $10,000 in interest each year of their loan. This is just another Democratic PR stunt that doesn't fix a thing. And they want you to keep voting for them for these shitty, weak ass measures. Like, we saw this with Roe versus Wade. They only want you to vote for them just for the false hope and belief that they can uh, just get it back to the way it used to be in the Supreme Court. And they're lying to us about codifying. And what you're noticing right now is I think people just don't have high enough standards still, because Biden's approval rating has actually shot up quite a bit since this news came out. And that's problematic. We should have some standards for ourselves, a backbone. For if I was less than 10K left of student debt, that shit would not be good enough to earn my vote back. Hell, even if everyone's debt somehow got canceled, that still wouldn't be good enough, just because of the other amounts of debt that exist, such as medical debt, housing debt, car debt. There's a lot of debt issues that go beyond the student loan debt. And we notice the right try to bring this on as a little gotcha, as a way to be against it. But that doesn't work for people who are serious about trying to expand the debt movement as much as possible, because I believe that it's not limited to students. There's a whole wide group of people who can use that relief. And guess what? The banks often get that relief. The corporations, the lobbyists, they get, when they need help, they get it. I mean, look at the start of the pandemic. The biggest upward wealth transfer in history happened. Kelly, Biden's approval ratings have gone up. Blue MAGA is happy for any crumbs that they get. And don't forget, there's some of the left who is pretty fucking gullible enough to accept this as being good enough. And that's why I'm saying that these people need to develop higher standards than that. So I don't think it's all blue MAGA, just because I believe that blue MAGA was always their ride or die anyway. If we're being honest here, they go up because of the people who aren't as ecstatic of supporters. And what's sad is there's people who think this is going to suddenly swing things, and I don't think we're at the right time to be saying that. Yeah, that's right, Leah Neely. How much worse can it really get? We're fucked over with bad credit anyway, and we see certain rich people, like Donald Trump, for example, they've been able to file bankruptcy multiple times and still uh, get absurd amounts of wealth time and time again. And this is a pretty good thread from Fiorella Isabel, one half of the Combo Couch and on RT. Amazing that the Biden administration gives nearly $3 billion more to Ukraine, closing in on $10.9 billion total. Yet the writer crying about a potential $10K student debt forgiveness? Why don't you care more about the former? Because they make you focus on each other, not them. First of all, Biden is a literal reason why student loans are such a huge issue. Prices have increased for college. People used to be able to afford it. Now they can't, and it's become a corporate business. Not everyone goes, but it's still an issue. And the right kind of points out the price increase for college, but they have the wrong takeaway here. They think it's the liberals have make you think that the only way to advance is through college. But the problem is, trade schools are still pretty damn tough to afford as well. And don't forget the fact that they try to tell you about there being jobs that you can luck your way into getting decent pay. And it's not as easy as you would think it would be. Plus the fact that when they propose, oh, just go to work instead. But then you ignore the wage problem and how it's pretty much impossible for anyone to afford living in a one-bedroom apartment on just working 40 hours a week, even if you're somehow making like $25-$30 an hour. And that's why people end up having to work 60-70 hours a week between multiple jobs. So when they point out the problems with there not being jobs for alternate college, they ignore the wage problem. No, 15 still wouldn't be enough. Even if Republican dominated Congress somehow passed $10, $11, $12. That isn't even close. We need thriving wages. And neither Democrats or Republicans have any answer to that. You should be angry and appalled. Your government has given billions to a foreign country, billions ending in the hands of actual fascists, or the black market, or Zelensky's pocket. What about the billions to Israel? Blood money, all of it. Why don't you cry about your tax dollars then? A point that I've been making a lot whenever people talk about complaining about their tax tuition, their money, paying for someone else's college. Oh, here's how again. I paid for my tuition in the 90s with help from family. I would be overjoyed if everyone's student debt were wiped off the charts right now. That's the point. When your mind isn't caught up in the selfishness, you would be extremely ecstatic if we were able to get that to that point. But the truth is, they've Republicans have done a great job of making people believe in being really selfish, having this every man for their self type of mentality. And it even bleeds into the liberals, as we say. When a liberal bleeds, a fascist shows. And even if you look through Twitter over the past week, you'll eventually see some boot-looking ass liberals also complain about, say that, blame you for the debt that you got yourself into. You got 10K already, stop complaining. They manipulate you to only care about money being taken from you when it's to provide for someone else, which is propaganda to make you hate your neighbor, make you less empathetic. Hello? They always take money from the working class for the rich, which are now corporations. That right there is Exhibit A of the biggest problem with this mindset that the average right wing person gets propagandized into. Why do I have to pay for someone else's debt? You shouldn't. That's the problem. This government makes you, the working class, pay for everything so much that you can't afford to live. So instead of going at them, you can blame your neighbor who also can't, vying for breadcrumbs. And this is what the 10K really is. Breadcrumbs. It's going to come back in interest in a short amount of time. And it's because the government that we have right now doesn't want to hardly pay for anything to benefit the working class. Their purpose is to enrich themselves. Meanwhile, they continue taking money from you, not just via taxes, but huge transfers of wealth via their Inflation Reduction Act and Build Back Better. Yes, that never helps anyone but the top 1%. And the moment some ask for help, some of you say they're asking for handouts. No. People are begging to stay afloat. They're asking for what was taken from them by a predatory government ruled by corporations and psychopaths. But asking isn't working, and they're going after all of you. Start understanding you're in the sinking boat together, not enemies at all. Biden made it so student debt can't be part of Chapter 7 filing for bankruptcy. He was a Democrat. His party affiliation is irrelevant as anyone's at this point. They work together behind the scenes and play you like it's a WWE wrestling game. It stops when you stop it. Yes. Stop falling for the kayfabe. These guys in the government, they'll break kayfabe all the time. Finally, poor people are not the problem. What poor government is. The disaster of a government in charge creating poverty via the corporate sector. It's not about individuals, it's about corporations now. Your government is a corporation with a military and an intelligence sector. By the way, 10,000 is nothing but a tiny band-aid on a huge issue. Most of it will go to accrued interest, which they will raise, as breadcrumbs, and some will blame that action as a handout for any problems we face. Perfection for a failed neoliberal propaganda. And this is why uh, there's a lot of front running going on right now when it comes to the whole, oh, this thing is going to turn around the midterms. Because we know that they they only did another half measure here. Sure, I do think it's absolutely important that the financial relief comes first. But what needs to follow is the interest rate control. That needs to be next. The the taxation when it comes to these loans too. It all goes hand in hand here. And Democrats are always the king of only giving you faulty half measures. When if they actually did something where they covered up more of the holes, this would be less flawed. Because if you actually did the whole interest rate control too, that can actually feel a bit more than the 10K that they're of crumbs that you're getting. But people who try to pit the two and two together, that's bad politics right there. And that doesn't matter regardless of the policies that you're trying to get forced through. And this is a great Caitlin Johnstone. And this is for the hedging foreign policy left. Keep supporting U.S. foreign policy, American progressives. They'll definitely give you health care any minute now. If you just hate Russia and China a little harder. And that's been one of the most annoying themes since late February when Russia decided to finally respond after years of being provoked by Ukraine. And that we even have some big lefty channels doing the bread too light shit, like the Van Garbage, who got their asses handed to them by Aaron Mateo, who didn't even really have to give them the time of day to uh, explain why he didn't even want to, when they got upset about his pushback. I mean, I think I'm going to go off into that tangent anyway, just because I think it's important to, because I went to college for journalism. So I think that's why I want to discuss why the Vanguard took issue with that in a bit. But look, this moment even made it into wrestling. So I'll play this for a bit.
Another talent meeting. You little jerks get no respect. We wipe you out like Biden did student debt.
As you can see, Kyle Kolinsky shared the video. And he's such a mark for the cheap pop promo lines. And even though if you're a fan of wrestling, this tag team has been getting a bit over as of late, but this was kind of a lame line, nonetheless. But since Kyle's a big D-Generation X fan, he probably enjoys the easy, catchy-ass promo lines like those. But since this is... Now I'll go into this for a bit since it is relevant to my experience with journalism.
What have I cozied up to? And what do you mean by cozy? My agenda is factual discussion of a very dangerous proxy war. Wait, what? What? What have I cozied up to? And what do you mean by cozying up to the populist right? What exactly have I done? You want to call that coddling the right? I'm challenging censorship. I'm trying to characterize you accurately, if that's okay. Like you mentioned, for example, he's praised Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, I praised her too because she voted against the Ukraine proxy war. Now you're bringing me on to ask me about my views of other people. What I will never apologize for is defending Jackson from being censored. I find it strange that you're trying to engage in a debate with him through me. I'm not responsible for his views. Have him on your show. Why not? Bring him on. Do I agree with your name calling of Jackson? Absolutely not. Tucker, for example, has had me on to talk about the dirty war in Syria and the OPCW cover-up scandal, whereas some leftist outlets will trash me for covering that same topic. What I do say, though, is that they've been sensible on some really important issues like nuclear war, Ukraine proxy war, and the Syria dirty war. It's sad that Marjorie Taylor Greene is better than Bernie Sanders on certain really important issues. I think a big problem on the left is a refusal to call out the Ukraine proxy war. There's no anti-war movement right now. That's what I'm worried about. Not whether some people are too close with some members of the right. If Marjorie Taylor Greene is voting against the Ukraine proxy war or is calling, unlike any member of the Squad or the Democratic Party, to pardon Julian Assange, I have to welcome that. Right now, the reality is there are some people on the right saying some sensible things on some important issues. Not one member of the Squad can bring themselves to vote at any time against funding the military-industrial complex, and expanding NATO, and fueling the Ukraine proxy war. Where are the calls even for diplomacy? You are hearing some of that on the right, and I just can't ignore that.
You got knocked the fuck out, man!
My agenda is factual discussion.
Yeah, shout out to Turncoat Dawn for putting together that little compilation. And the reason why this started was because the guys of the Vanguard got upset for the way that they thought that Aaron Mate should have gone ballistic on this one guest that they had on like a couple months ago on the Gray Zone with Max Blumenthal, and how he tried to do a quick little pushback on Aaron on some view he disagreed with. But the thing was, he wasn't about to like ruin the rest of the purpose of their interview just to make that point. So Leo, the Vanguard, was way out of bounds for trying to use him as crate. Yes, exactly. And here's a thing that I think they have. Vanguard is exactly the top example of a channel who has tried to hedge like crazy over this Ukraine-Russia proxy war. And whenever they talk about it, they make that painfully clear. And I think their problem with it started because of the way that uh, Jimmy Dore called them out for going too soft on Ryan Grimm. So in my mind, they're like the person that got caught cheating on a test, and now they've overcorrected to the point where they feel like they have to be the ones who tattletale on everyone else in the future who gets caught cheating on a test as well. And you can tell that these guys, they tend to go into meltdown mode a lot. They're not like uh, they're not like a very professional when it comes to the interviewing aspect of it. I mean, look at Brianna Joy Gray. There's people who can do these interviews and still like maintain their sense of cool, even when they start to push back and challenge them with tougher questions. And you can tell that when, especially Gavin is, they start to get very emotional when they get into the whole when they try to push people. Like you saw it last year when they interviewed Lee Camp when they tried to get him to talk about issues with the movement for a People's Party, and they had that emotional outburst come out again with Aaron on last week, and that's just the part of their emotional immaturity on that part. And I absolutely understand that you can't always just go ballistic on someone whenever they say something you disagree with. Sometimes you have to just handle it the way Aaron did and just leave it simply as that. Because when you do these interviews, sometimes you have other goals in mind, and that you just can't get into a big ass verbal fight with someone and potentially ruin it. Like the way that Jordan Sheridan did that with Nick Brana, but in a way, kind of provoked that shit too. Yes, if you look at the way that their channel is, I feel like uh, a lot of the people who regularly watch and chat are definitely closer to the TYT portion of the left. And you know what's sad? They have really plateaued in terms of their subscribers. They've been stuck in like that mid 20K range since last year. So when they try to call out channels like Secular Talk or some of these other big ass channels for not growing, guess what? These guys aren't growing anymore either. And it's because uh, people have gotten tired of their style. And the clickbaity drama is just getting old and redundant, and it's not doing anything. And I gotta also address one last thing here, and it's that feud that they have with Jackson Hinkle is very weird. And I say that as Jackson is better on the foreign policy issues, but he started to become slowly worse and worse on social issues. Not a surprise if you've heard him talk during the dating episode with on the bad faith. And there are plenty of issues with Jackson Hinkle that even people on our part of the left have. But that feud is extremely weird. And and we know that's not going to go anywhere, and they're both probably just going to never interact with each other again. But yeah, that's an important lesson in journalism right there, that you have to have poise, you have to be calculated, and know that not every moment can be, every interview can turn into this aggressive attack on your guest. Oh yeah, I do have one example of the whole right. Student loan forgiveness undermines one of our military's greatest recruitment tools at the time of dangerously low enlistments. That's a good thing that people are not enlisting to the military. In fact, it should be even less. And my response to this is, how about we get the 90% budget cut to go with people's lack of interest? We know that you guys won't want it. I mean, you don't even agree to a pathetic 5% budget cut. For Christ's sakes. I think I'm just going to go to the Tim. I think that's enough. Oh, yeah, another point. A good tweet from Max Blumenthal a few days ago. U.S. government is hiring 87,000 new IRS agents to make sure more of its citizens' money go to Ukraine. And calling that out is not a right-wing Republican talking point. Progressive voice, where parliamentarians just voted to give themselves a 70% pay raise financed by international aid. Yet you have Queen Whiteboard, Katie Porter, manufacturing consent for this whole IRS agents. Like, they're going to go after the rich. Really? They're not going to go after the rich. And that's why I barely even give mouth energy to this whole Trump and FBI shit, because we know at the end of the day, shit is going to happen to him. There's going to be some slaps on the wrist. Trump will not be in jail. Y'all got to stop falling for the theater. Where parliamentarians just voted to give themselves a 70% pay raise by. There's one thing that United States politicians and Ukraine politicians have in common. It's that they will always give themselves pay raises for doing shitty ass jobs and making the lives of other people worse. And guess what? If you want an example of another thing they just did over the Zelensky just did was make it illegal for workers to collectively bargain for their rights. And it's no wonder how they've manipulated so many liberals to be in favor of this shit. So gullible. So damn gullible. Okay, now we'll get into the other big thing, news-wise, and it was when Mark Zuckerberg just recently did a interview with Joe Rogan, and he'll reveal the whole handling of the Hunter Biden laptop story. So I think it's a good clip to get into.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York
we had that
Post.
too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. I mean, basically, the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. There was we thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have, if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically.
This is where fake news has broken the brains of people. I mean, seriously, we should be able to determine through discourse whether things are fact or not. Especially when the powerful ruling elite are constantly deceiving and lying to us. And what we know, fact checker really is just translation for making sure that it fits a neoliberal agenda.
Being determined whether it was false. The distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
It got shared.
how does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less. So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely.
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful. But I mean, but basically, a lot of people were still able to share it. We got a lot of complaints that was the case. Obviously this is a hyper-political issue, so depending on what side of the political spectrum, you either think we didn't censor it enough or censored it way too much. But we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's like very professional law enforcement, if they come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously.
If there's anything that just recently has shown us is the FBI is far from legitimate. The way that they're pretty much agenda organization in favor of the Democrats. And the fact that even the FBI has had problems before they started to raid Trump. They also ignore potential mass shooters. Yes, that's a common theme with these mass shooters is the FBI does know about it, but they won't do shit about it. So there's absolutely plenty of issues that make the FBI a deeply illegitimate organization. And also, don't forget they recently raided the Uhuru movement in St. Petersburg, Florida. And even though and they were at a recent Center for Political members from that movement. We're at the Center for Political Innovation movement. So, and I know Caleb Maupin's in deep shit right now, but he did invite members from the Uhuru movement to one of his recent events. So, if anything, the organizations like the Uhuru movement should be invited to be involved in more socialist organizations within this country. But back to the topic at hand here.
Did they specifically say you need to be on guard about that story?
I don't remember if it was that specifically, but it basically fit the pattern.
Look at that wishy-washy tiptoeing when you could just tell from the expressions. Yes, Mark Zuckerberg was pretty damn robotic, as you could see in that moment when he had an answer to that question from Joe Rogan. So let's take a minute to dissect this, shall we? Look at the major problems that the fake news has, the way it's broken the brains of liberals all over the country. I mean, look at this. We've gone from a big tech, which would clamp down a little to some on the left, but now they've turned the volume up quite a bit. Look at the way there's pretty much censorship waves for independent media every few months now. And it's because of people like Mark Zuckerberg, like the people who run Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, name them all. Anything that is big tech and has connections with the politicians and a function like a corporation are causing freedom of speech to become a major problem in the United States. Yes, very, very sad, Kelly, that the fact that the head of Facebook said FBI, a legitimate organization, is tragically hilarious. And he nearly choked on a boot as he said that. And the problem with this is, as we know, the discourse on the FBI as of late, where there's parts of the left who are only interested in crying about, right-wing hypocrisy on the FBI, rather than doing the work to pull them over to our position on the FBI, showing them that there's far more to be outraged at the FBI over. I don't think they've forgotten yet about the instances where they've ignored tips that could have potentially prevented mass shootings, such as the Buffalo shooting. I think they may have been able to help also prevent the Uvalde shooting as well. It's been a few weeks, couple months, but I don't think the right has forgotten about stuff like that. But how about we show them what they do to the left, like the raiding the Uhuru movement, the way that the FBI was responsible for the deaths of Fred Hampton and Martin Luther King Jr. Get them to care about, have that same energy for when these institutions go after the left. Because right now, it's chimney crickets in comparison when the FBI does actually go after the left, like the Black Panthers. Can be another example of that. But instead, we just have people who are still far too caught up in the left-right game. This is not the moment for that. Do you see? Are you still ignorant to the fact that the real enemy of the moment is the ruling class? The real enemy is up there, not at our levels. And these are moments where they could be opportunities to pull people from the right over, at least on certain issues. And that's why we have a lot of people on the left who are so unserious about getting shit actually done. I mean, for example, there could be enough people on the right who can help us with like getting to universal health care. We could potentially help get some people past the whole slogan with defund the police and talk about how it's about reallocating funds to other services and get them to be for the individual services aspect of it. We could get them on board with trying to push for thriving wages. But the problem is, there's a lot of the left who does this whole purity test, and it's not like the way that the liberals do it. The liberals have it in a way that's set up as this big tent anti-purity test, while there's leftists who do the full-on purity test. Oh, there's one thing you're not for at all. Oh, we can't work together on the other 9 issues that you would help with. And that's a major problem too. And we also have to point out how they also have issues with like, oh, you're too conservative, socially conservative for someone on the left, when that person's economic seriousness will definitely help a lot with the connecting of the social and economic aspect of it to help with the marginalized social groups in this country. So, as for the Hunter Biden laptop thing, the pathetic part about it is the fact that what I've said back then was I did not believe it was a needle mover. You went through all this trouble to protect yourself from making sure that anything possible wouldn't give Donald Trump an advantage to win the election. Re-election, that is. And the reason why I think that the laptop thing was not going to be a needle mover in the same way that Benghazi and Hillary's emails were is because I believe people were still not going to let anything override the priority of how poorly Trump was handling COVID. But now revisionary history shows that Joe Biden had vaccine shots and decided to essentially have the same type of response as Trump did, if not worse. But that's the absolute pathetic part about how big tech handled this Hunter Biden laptop story and how we're just barely getting more of the juicier details on this. And at election time, and how he's Hunter, that is a deranged cocaine addict. And there's some pretty crazy videos that were collected from his laptop. And the fact that they still could have won the election if they just let that story go like many of the other ones. Our Trump-loving neighbors, who we really like, our great parents, agree with us on Assange and a mutual hatred of Hillary Clinton. Yes, that is a start. And I say that even though my mom has done the whole anti-Democrat shift now, the thing is, she's still pro-union. It's easy to get her to any foreign policy position of the left just by talking about the money. The only problems is still tough to make ground with her on the police state and reparations. Those are the main two issues for someone who considers herself right to make traction. Yes, we definitely have seen enough of those nipples. No mas. Yeah, we won't. Hopefully, we won't have to deal with more leaks of that over the time. But I think this part of the things that I was talking about from with the whole fake news thing, it actually connects to this article on Colin Cowherd. He's the host of The Herd on Fox Sports Radio and FS1. And he did a little and someone from Awful Announcing did an article about that. So I think that's a good transition from that. Let's see this. There we go. I thought I was going to have to shift that over to Firefox for a moment. So Colin Cowherd declares fake news an outdated term. So let's get into the main point that he was making from this. Not more than 2 hours after Stephen A. Smith claimed we got some fake-ass people in the media, Colin Cowherd was on Fox Sports declaring that that wasn't true. So, yes, I am about to... Yeah, let's see. That's being difficult on Chrome, so I'm going to switch that over to Firefox real quick. There's a few sites that they just don't really load well on Chrome, even though StreamYard recommends using Chrome to share stuff on. So I generally try to keep it there, but every now and then there's a few sites that don't load well on Chrome. And Awful Announcing is one of those. So I got a lot of tabs up, so just stay patient with me. Let's see, StreamYard. Oh yeah. Now we ready. And oh man. Firefox is stuck in not responding mode. man, my shit's freezing up like crazy. Oh. You're funny. You're funny. People on my channels are hardly Biden voters. In fact, most of us are probably not ever going to vote Democrats again. Oh, shit. And this Firefox is freezing up. All right. See, why does this shit matter? A lot of people in this, the people who are content creators on the independent left, and also a lot of the people who watch these channels have probably voted for a Democrat once in their life, at least. But now a lot of people are being dragged to the point where they're not going to vote for either of the parties anymore. And I am one of those people. And it's not about how long, it's about whether you get here right now. Even though we may be a bit late on that, but the important part is getting here now. No, I voted Howie Hawkins. Not very many people on the left were excited about Howie Hawkins, but I had to make it count for a left-wing party, at least. Even though it was really disappointing turnout, because after Jill Stein had like 3%, Howie only got like 0.3%, and after you saw Howie do that interview during the third party summit with Nick Cruz, you could see why he was only able to get 0.3%. Let's try that again. Now we got it. Colin Cowherd was on Fox Sports declaring his trust in the media. That's drastically different opinions of the industry by two of sports media's most well-known personalities, with Cowherd taking specific aim at the term fake news, a phrase exhausted by former President Donald Trump and his rabid supporters. If the media makes a mistake, fake news, it's a broad brush. The media doesn't know what they're talking about, Cowherd said as he began to debunk the term fake news. I've been in it 30 years. Overwhelmingly, I trust the people in the media to call it right. Some people have political agendas, that's obvious, that goes without saying, but 95% of the media is really good. People make mistakes like pilots make mistakes, like doctors make mistakes. It's life. So for those of you that have seen Colin before, he's a pretty socially conservative sports talk radio host. He'll often go after like the more flamboyant quarterbacks like Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton, Baker Mayfield. He's very much the type of guy who likes the athletes who aren't very outspoken. Consistent with Cowherd's hosting style, the assessment was really a long way for the Fox Sports radio host to make the point that he believes in the media's reporting of San Francisco 49ers quarterback Trey Lance. Okay, that doesn't have anything relevant with the point that I'm trying to make, but we'll go a couple paragraphs down. While I agree fake news should be retired, it's for a different reason than what the Fox host described. Cowherd believes media is 95% really good. And I will tell you that it's actually the opposite. Even your liberal media. I find fake news to be an exhaustive term often leaned on by people attempting to mask negative COVID coverage as being unfair, regardless of merit, but I commend Cowherd's 95% assessment of their media. It's a nice goal for the industry to achieve. Question is, have y'all even looked at liberal media and the way they cover up and play defense for Joe Biden in this year and a half plus since he's taken office? What Donald Trump was saying was about fake news. He was actually half correct on it, except the fact that the people on the right were just as responsible for the fake news in the corporate media just as much as the liberals are. And that 95% of people are just doing the corporate media's bidding in the way that the corporate media wants them to. I mean, every now and then you get like a voice here and there who gets to slightly descend and be a bit more independent minded rhetorically. Like, for as bad as Tucker Carlson is, he has at least moments where he brings on people to give the right foreign policy takes or gives a platform to the left. So that right there is the rare moments of that. But overall, 95% of people in journalism just do the orders of the corporate media's bidding. And that's not really good, in my opinion. And if I had been able to dive into the whole journalism thing the way I wanted to, I could have fallen trap into those 95% of people doing the bidding of the corporations. Hey, WCSN. Good to hear that you finished up with that neighbor's greenhouse. Kelly was telling me about that at the beginning of the stream. Hope you've been good as of late, man. So that's why I'm glad that life kind of threw a wrench and prevented me from really, really trying to establish myself in journalism that way I wanted to. Because even if I was just some regular sports personality, I could have still fallen trap into believing the same damn corporate propaganda as many of the people at these other news publications do, and overly trust the work of their colleagues too much. So fake news should not be a thing that's retired, because the corporate media across the board is misleading you. And you have to go to independent media to get the truth. And I think that we're slowly starting to see more and more people gravitate towards the independent media for their news. They're not going to the right outlets for it. There's some bad ones. Alex Jones. Many of the right-wing outlets that you see on like Rumble. But the good thing is that there's some lefties that are trying to capitalize on those platforms as well. So let's move forward. I actually found like 3 good local stories to work into today's show. As for someone who doesn't cover enough local news here. But before I do that, I think I'm going to go grab some more water. So let's play a bit of music for a moment. All right, we back. Welcome into the Rochford Files. This, once again, is your host, Andrew Rochford, live on YouTube and Twitch. So let's get into the first of the three local stories I got. And this first one will be in relation to college speech. Give this one a moment to load. Pretty cloudy Sunday afternoon here. Night. Cloudy, overcast. And this story comes from the Gazette. As today the laptop's been kind of slow with the multitude of tabs I got up. And now it's gotten a bit unresponsive, but I am working on getting rid of a few of these tabs to help make things a bit easier for the finish. Apologies if I'm freezing up on StreamYard currently. Alright, and it's coming back around. So DU professor says he's a political target after controversial comment on Rushdie. Local Jewish leaders want the words of one of the University of Denver's top religious scholars to be condemned by the school after he suggested that the attack on Salman Rushdie could have been orchestrated by Israel's Mossad intelligence agency. He mentioned the option at the end of the list of other possibilities. The school didn't condemn Nader Hashemi's words, but the professor dismisses his opinion on the matter. Hashemi, DU's director of Middle Eastern Studies, thinks he's become a political target because he dared not to fall in line with Israeli-friendly politics. And that right there is another quite similar story to the way that Dr. Cornel West, you remember how Harvard would not give him tenure, it was because he is pro-Palestine on the Israel-Palestine issue. And this story has many of the same parallels here. He made controversial comments during a national podcast interview on August 20th. During the half-hour discussion with Spotify's Iran podcast, Hashemi was asked his opinion on who might have been behind the August 12th stabbing attack on novelist Salman Rushdie. Rushdie survived that brutal attack. He was stabbed in the neck and abdomen as he was preparing to speak at the Chuatuahua Institution, I know I butchered that, in upstate New York. Hadi Matar, 24 in New Jersey, was arrested. A motive for the attack is still unclear, but authorities seized a computer, books, and knives from the suspect's basement apartment. Matar said he hasn't not read Rushdie's controversial book, The Satanic Verses. Rushdie's son, Zafar, said in an August 14th tweet that his father is still in critical condition and that the attack was severe. His usual feisty and defiant sense of humor remains intact. Hashemi, who regularly lectures on the intricacies of Middle Eastern politics, listened on the podcast several possibilities as to who may have wanted to kill Rushdie, including the fact that the attacker may have been lured by social media, the possibility that Iran may have been behind it in retaliation for who was assassinated. As if you're someone who pays attention to the foreign policy coverage of Richard Medhurst, you'll know that much of the Middle East is leaving Palestine out to fend for itself. And that would very much make sense. Hashemi's final suggestion that a Mossad agent masquerading as an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps member may have instigated the attack on Rushdie's life is what drew the ire of Jewish leaders. In a statement, Jewish Colorado wrote, Hashemi's perverse position is yet another example of falsely blaming and scapegoating Jews for intervening in international affairs in manipulative and violent ways for nefarious gains. And this right here is just another example of the Zionist talk that you often get. Jewish people often have that big victimhood type of the mentality, not victimhood, but like they get the mentality of like someone who acts as their people can do no wrong. And that's essentially what their issue is with the Israel-Palestine conflict, and where they essentially make up they just break out the anti-Semite card when most of the people who call out the atrocity that is happening to the Palestinian people point out that this has nothing to do with religion. And the fact that Palestinians are Semites. So the issue of anti-Semitism should not be very relevant here. DU immediately responded to the criticism by noting Hashemi's views do not reflect those of the university. And the reason why someone like an institution like the University of Denver has to say that is because deep down inside they're really pro-Israel, and that with the way that Jewish people control a lot of things, they don't want to lose. They want to make sure that bread continues to get buttered. And if they come out with a statement that is pro-Palestinian, then that bread's going to dry up. While we wholeheartedly respect academic freedom and freedom of speech, his comments do not reflect the point of view of the university, nor are we aware of any facts that support his view. The University of Denver statement said. You know how they have no spine to allow someone to make statements that go against Israel, but they'll follow that spine can bend over backwards 8 ways to Sunday to defend pro-pedophilia discourse in universities. That's the sad and pathetic part of it. And you know, the pro-pedophilia really got started through academia. The international political kerfuffle started when the Jerusalem Post wrote an article noting Hashemi's most inflammatory comments. By the next evening, the dean of DU's Corbel School contacted the professor via phone, expressing deep concern. On Thursday, local Jewish leaders called DU to condemn his statements, even suggesting Hashemi's words had put Jewish students in danger. Hashemi scoffed at the idea. He told the Gazette, if nuanced and critical discussion of world politics put students at risk, we should immediately close down the Joseph Corbel School of International Affairs at DU. And once again, this is another big theme of these past 6+ years and counting, is the fact that historically the United States has been about limiting discourse rather than furthering opening it up. And yes, that includes the right too. The right has not been serious about opening up discourse as well. In fact, if anything, they've just gotten more. They're just comfortable as long as they're included, their windows included in the discourse, not when the left gets shut off from it, because that's what their focus, their priority is on. That's where they've been at. And that's just another example of how discourse gets so limited in the university aspect of things. And time again, we just have become too accustomed to seeing it accepted. WCSN, I'm pretty sure the entirety of Christianity was started as a pedophilia organization, just pointing out the obvious. A good point to make off of my point of illustrating how these universities will allow the discourse of pedophilia get accepted, but when it comes to foreign policy views that challenge the West, no, that shit gets shut down. Yes, that once again is very true, Kelly. Notice no one is mentioning the welfare of Palestinian students. Hashemi is incensed with DU for throwing him under the bus, calling their response defamatory. Quite similar to the way that Harvard threw Professor Dr. Cornel West under the bus. It raises serious questions about DU's commitment to supporting faculty of color, particularly when they're deliberately targeted. Mark Lamont Hill, former CNN contributor, can attest to that too. When he made a pro-Palestinian statement on their platform, but he got fired and called an anti-Semite. The professor says he will continue to speak out. I'm going to speak out in defense of academic freedom, the political values that I strongly believe in, and in context of the Israel-Palestine conflict, I will continue to support a resolution of this crisis based on full equal rights of Israelis and Palestinians. And I'm sure when he says that, he understands that it's Palestinians that obviously need to be met much further for a resolution on that. He plans to give a lecture on the controversy sometime during the fall quarter. So the reason why I feel like this is important to me is because I was a college student too. And for example, when we talked about policing, we didn't talk about defunding the police or police abolition. The discourse was stuck in the window of just the typical BS liberal reforms. And this is a great example of how they're trying to close the discourse window with foreign policy. And that the only way that you can get yourself outside of that window is you have to go seek that out on your own, whether that's through Twitter, YouTube, and other platforms where you can find independent media to do that. And this professor right here is someone that is not making an unreasonable point whatsoever to say that Israel could be involved when it comes to someone like in this attack right here. And it's sure this stuff is happening at universities all over the country where you've got professors who do not fall in line with what the corporate approved narrative is when it comes to Israel and Palestine. And that. So we've noticed the left draws lines in the sand when their progressives try to hedge or become pro-Israel on the issue. And these are the examples of the real free speech issues. The right thinks that these institutions don't allow for their free speech to be open. If anything, we've seen that conservatives don't really have the problems that they manufacture when it comes to their speech, because for the exception of an Alex Jones, they're pretty secure within that free speech window that the United States has. It's the issues that are to the left of what the Democratic Party is willing to accept. That's where the discourse is being shut off at schools and universities all over the country. So if you're on the right, it's time to break free of this understanding of this manufactured outrage of something that isn't really happening as much as you think it is. Stuff like this, with this Professor Nader Hashemi, that's the stuff that's happening regularly all over the country. Not the censorship of your right-wingers. So Nine News had a. Now there's a couple things with the element of propaganda to break down in real time. So let's start off with a couple of local news articles here, too. So let's go here. So Nine News put out a bit of propaganda here, and you'll see why how they're doing it. It's been a frustrating and sometimes frightening year from Jennifer, a lifelong Denver resident who has lived for the past 14 years in the Chaffee Park neighborhood. Since last September, Jennifer said she has been trying to get Denver police to arrest a man who has set more than a dozen small fires near her home, most recently about a week ago. Jennifer said she called police at least 3 times. The first time, it took officers about 20 minutes to get there. The second time, they never showed up at all. The third time, on Thursday night, it took nearly half an hour. If it hadn't been so long, he could have been apprehended. We wouldn't be having this problem. She said, it's very disappointing. It makes me feel unsafe because this is a serious safety issue, but God forbid there's something worse, like being attacked. The police response time is definitely gone up. I know that for a fact. According to the Denver police, the average response time for low priority 911 calls in 2018 was 29 minutes, though the first half of the year increased to 34 minutes, more than 5.5 minutes longer. So this right here is the first point to debunk. WCSN. Is arson even a crime anymore? Fletch. I changed Grand Theft Auto to arson. But yeah, this underlying point is the first thing to start. Think about, isn't this a point where we should be reassessing the types of low priority calls the police should be taking? Hence, what part of the defund the police movement is doing is consolidating duties of the police. That way they have more time to respond to things that matter. But no, you've got police bootlickers who want the police to have the full assortment of those current duties plus more. And think about the types of things that they have to respond to that take away time, like traffic stops, and parking violations. We know that there's like other institutions that could take over some of the things that kill these response times and make it to where it could end the mental health calls where they're better taken by like mental health professionals, not police officers who only know how to handle things with guns. Perhaps even more alarming, since 2018, response times for the highest priority calls like those for shootings have increased nearly 3 minutes, and it's now 14.5 minutes. Once again, this is another point. The problem isn't the fact that you have to fund the police more, like some of these, like the Democrats and Republicans alike want you to think. It's the fact that you have them doing way too many duties. And if you consolidated what they were supposed to do, then they could potentially be more successful at that job. But that's just in its current form. Now, if it was abolished and replaced with policing done by communities instead, like many of us would want, then we could see these things come down even more. Denver police chief says he's deeply concerned by the increase in response times, which he described as supply and demand problem. Too much demand for police services and too few cops in the streets. And that right there is that's their issue, not a us issue. If people are starting to see through the facade of this institution of the police state and realize that it's a fruitless endeavor to try to change it from the inside, then that's their problem, not an us problem. And even though Joe Biden essentially wants to have the second crime bill and figure out a way to pull another 100 cops out of his ass, then that's their issue, not us. And if people leaving the force is what it takes for real change to happen, then so be it. And this is even in a state, supposedly, where there's the new star thing. The new star police response program here in Denver. And even if that... Oh, nice. You have an aunt in Highlands Ranch, Kelly? Exactly. I know Highlands Ranch is like, that's a really nice ass area. And I've even haven't been there that much. My aunt in Highlands Ranch says, crime is not a problem here, LOL. I guess it's good to be a middle-class Caucasian boomer. Exactly. And most of my family is in Littleton, like the west part of Littleton. Highlands Ranch is like the eastern part of Littleton. And crime is not really a problem there. Although, Kelly, it is cool that you have family here as well. Like WCSN and the family that he has in Aurora. There's too much demand, with 4.2% increase in calls for service last year and a depleting workforce. About 178 officers separated from the police department last year, Pazin said. Every neighborhood in Denver deserves a timely response when an individual is facing an emergency. And it's our goal and objective to meet those needs. If anything, I think every neighborhood in this whole country deserves their needs and their basic security to be met. That way, they wouldn't have to call the police as often, if anything. Although a lot of those people have gotten to the point where they've lost their trust in the institution because they know how often police don't help them and can come in and make shit worse. My Aurora-based sister's in Switzerland right now for some reason. I hope she's enjoying her trip there and is having fun. Pazin said, a big part of the solution is hiring more cops, which has been a major problem for several years now. At this point, DPD, the department is down 240 officers, or 15% from its authorized strength of 1,600. Once again, they're pushing the common propaganda here, saying that the only way to improve things is more. But we've seen what fully overloaded police forces in LA and New York and Miami do. And they do not solve the problems of crime. If anything, all there is just more people for the same amount of crime that doesn't go away. So yes, even though we commonly don't pay attention to the national stories when it comes to the propaganda and pushing the agenda that the only way these problems can be addressed through that, and it still feels very illogical to liberals to think that you could potentially solve problems in ways indirectly. That's why I say making sure people's basic needs are met, for one, and consolidating duties of police, because they clearly do way too much. And this is with the mental health response program in place in certain parts of the city. So think about that for me. But it's also limited to a few neighborhoods as well. And there's also some like conflict there and some undermining going on. That a new connection has brought up to me. A little cool discussions there. And the cool part is you never know where you could find cool people to talk about meaningful shit like this. Or it could even be on some obscure app that is off the radar of the common person. So there's always an opportunity to expose people to like independent media or discourse with political issues in the way that hasn't. Oh shit. Oh, I was saying that I was frozen for a moment, but you never know when you could have an opportunity to expose people to new, to move them over to you on issues, or find people that are in agreement with you. So let's go to this next piece that is also going to push its form of propaganda. Give this page a moment to load. It's weird as I did the loading process before the stream, but it's now blink on me. And it's tabs are being slow today. Parents are questioning why Denver South High School showed a video to the student body on Tuesday last week, offering tips about ways to respond to racist attacks. Part of the video encourages people not to call police for help. It's a video that's not sitting well with some parents and guardians. I think that's not appropriate, said Angelel Muhirigawa. Her niece is a sophomore at Denver South. She feels it puts police officers, even good ones, in a bad light. And when I say this: the good cop, bad cop thing is pointless semantics at this point. The system is bad. And if the system orders so-called good cops to fall in line with the same orders as the bad cops, then the system makes them all bad. And that's why when someone tries to pull you into those semantics, it's a pointless trap to get yourself taken into, because it's really the system that makes all cops bad. But there are bad individuals that gravitate towards that work. So that works with it as well, especially given the Nazi white supremacist connection to the police force as well. And you wonder why they treat them with kid gloves so often. They're the ones trying to help that kind of situation out. And parents or students shouldn't feel like they can't come to them for assistance, for help. Muhirikawa said, "Not all officers' intentions are to harm people of color." And you wonder why there's a movement to get cops out of schools. And the big reason for that is because they harass students of color. They get them prepped to get harassed by police as an adult. And it starts them to get punished in a worse way than white students in schools. And that's part of the root of why they got started. They don't want the cops in schools. And understanding that. And there's many other ways to work on getting people to be safe in schools without cops. And once again, that ties to the basic needs being met aspect of things, because the violence is caused by that. Denver Public Schools said as of last year, Denver South had 1,763 students, 47.2% were white, 33.2% Hispanic, 9.4% Black, 4.9% Asian, 0.9% American Indian or Alaska Native, 0.1% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders. So this right here is the video.
Tonight, some parents are questioning why a local high school showed a video to the student body offering tips about ways to respond to racist attacks.
In particular, a part of that video encouraging people to not call the police for help. I talked to some parents today to get their perspective on it.
If the victim hasn't asked you to call the police, do not, I repeat, do not call the police.
This is part of a nearly 4-minute video Denver Public Schools says it showed to the student body at Denver South High School on Tuesday.
Because police have been trained to see people of color, gender nonconforming folks, and Muslims as criminals, they often treat victims as perpetrators of violence.
A video that's not sitting well with some parents and guardians.
I think that it's not appropriate.
Angel McGearwa's niece is a sophomore in the high school. She says she feels it puts all police officers, even the good ones, in a bad light.
They're the ones that are trained to help that kind of situation out, and students shouldn't feel, or parents shouldn't feel as though that they're not able to come to them as a system when they're in need of help.
To give you some context, Denver South High School has more than 1,700 students. Around 47% are white, 32% are Hispanic, and 9% are Black. Denver South's principal posted this letter on the school website, saying in part that the intention behind the video was to provide empowerment for people who may witness these types of attacks and not to have any sort of negative impact on the relationship between Denver Public Schools and Denver Police. The district stressed it did not create the video and said the video was not properly vetted prior to its viewing, and says there are some narratives in this video that we do not subscribe to in DPS.
I think if a video was going to be shown, the parents had a right to know that it was going to be shown.
The president of the Denver Black Police Officers Organization says that while it's still very important that we capture the racial and bias events that may be occurring, it's also important to report these types of incidents so these types of acts aren't tolerated.
The video was created by the Barnard Center for Research on Women in 2017, which is based out of New York City. Now, we also heard back from the Denver Police Foundation. They stress that sharing a video that asks their students to directly engage in a potentially violent situation with no training or expertise on how to de-escalate and telling them not to call police is disappointing and discouraging. We have the full statements on our website at thedenverchannel.com.
So, I'm not sure who you are, but he already did. I'm not sure why you're going back to that point. Not that simple. When military gets to when they get to hand money over to corporations, military and banks and get bailed out endlessly, when is it time for the people to have that bailout too? But back to the point at hand here. You notice how they did the identity politics play as a way to people can use help with their mortgage too. That's not a gotcha for me. And the taxpayers are getting forced to fund the military against their own choices. So we can really have that discussion once we don't have to do shit like that. But you notice how they did the whole argument of they're using the identity politics at play here in order to try to make you still have a trust in police. Noticing how for the interview that they had a black woman talk about how not all cops are bad. Then the other part of it was the black police group in Denver. And also, when we've been through over the past couple of years, especially seeing what happened through the George Floyd protest, is the fact that people still haven't broken through the cognitive dissonance when it comes to questioning what we've been going through with the police state and how police can be called and so many things can be made worse by their presence. And that's a fact. And whenever possible, if you can work things out without calling them, that would always be the preferred way to go. Always the way to go with that. And the fact that when you challenge the propaganda, they're going to try to figure out a way to clamp down harder to make sure to challenge it. And that 7 News segment used multiple instances of identity politics as a justification to maintain the status quo, to help reinforce the status quo police state. When the reality is, there's a lot of problems. And the reason why they have to do this is because people are now opening themselves up to the ideas of defunding the police abolition, and now they're working overtime to fight against that. Couple things left to go. So, one of the most recognizable sports media voices, Stephen A. Smith, is now going to launch a non-sports podcast. And the reason why this article is important to cover is because what we know is going to happen is it's going to end up me telling you a little preview of some of his political takes. ESPN's Stephen A. Smith will be working with Odyssey's Cadence 13 partners to establish his own podcast called No Mercy with Stephen A. Smith. The podcast won't be sports related, though. The outspoken personality will discuss issues in politics, business, entertainment, social issues, and criminal justice, per Front Office reports. The podcast is set to debut on September 26th. Smith will still work with ESPN's First Take during the week. The network confirmed that his podcast will not impact his ESPN duties. He plans to release 3 episodes a week, premiering on Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings on the Odyssey app. It's hard to put words into how excited I am for this opportunity, Smith said in a statement. Although my love for sports will never fade, neither has my zest for expanding my interest beyond the court or field of play. I love news, I love entertainment, above else, I love attaching myself to others, touching on things that are percolating in the minds and the masses with no inhibitions. The 54-year-old has made appearances on Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN, regularly serving as a guest on cable news after ESPN laid him off briefly in 2009. I will go even further and say that we need to abolish our alphabet soup, FBI, CIA, ATF, GHS, and NSA, and just leave the marshals in charge. They seem to be the only ones that can get shit done. And that kind of reminds me of the same order that it wasn't a hook of a good Dead Prez track. But the reason why it's important to point out Stephen A. Smith, and he's now doing this shit, is be prepared. Because when Stephen A. Smith is going to talk politics, just remember, his takes are going to be pretty well in line with someone like a Jason Johnson or a Zerlina Maxwell. That's the type of person his political takes are going to align with. What they won't do, however, is, like, for example, remember what Stephen A. Smith said following the 2016 election when Colin Kaepernick did not vote for either person, for anyone. He said it undermined all the work Colin Kaepernick was doing. When the facts are, what we knew about Colin Kaepernick at the time was his work was more impactful than just checking some names on a ballot box on a paper every 2 to 4 years. And that he often also during the George Floyd protest, he also focused more on calling out looters and rioters rather than the police violence. So those are the types of liberal takes to be prepared for. And he's also very much a Democratic shill. So expect Stephen A. Smith to push whichever Democrat needs to be pushed at the time. He'll do his defense for Joe Biden pretty damn similar to Jamel Hill. I think based on the platform that it's being released to, I would say that it's going to be quite the uphill battle. Even though Stephen A. Smith is one of the most recognized voices in sports media, I don't think he's going to be able to prop up this Odyssey platform on his own. So, overall, just be prepared for some really shit-lib political takes from this guy, because with this podcast that he's going to be working on soon, which will come out in nearly a month, there's going to be a lot of shit-libbery coming out from this guy. A lot more than just the occasional moments where it crosses over with sports. One last thing for tonight, and that'll be on the former Buffalo Bills punter Matt Araiza. So let me pull up a good article for that. Hey, you spelled it right. Nice, another fake news source. CNN Blues failed before lunch. Yep. Nice wordplay for you as well. Lip tartary. So, Buffalo Bills release rookie punter Matt Araiza amid gang rape allegations. The Buffalo Bills are still dealing with the fallout of their handling of former punter Matt Araiza, who is alleged to have been involved in a gang rape of a minor last year when he attended San Diego State University. Buffalo selected Araiza in the 6th round of the 2022 NFL Draft with the 180th overall pick. He won the starting punter job August 22 when the team released veteran punter Matt Hack. Araiza was also set to serve as a holder during Bills' field goal and extra point attempt. Araiza was released Saturday after the alleged victim filed a civil suit Thursday in San Diego County Superior Court. So the allegations are that he sexually assaulted an inebriated 17-year-old high school senior outside of an off-campus party in October 2021 at the home where Araiza lived before bringing her inside a room where she allegedly assaulted by multiple men. According to the complaint, Araiza was 21 at the time, allegedly gave the victim a drink she believes not only contained alcohol, but other intoxicating substances, despite her saying she was in high school. Criminal charges have not been filed, pending an ongoing investigation. The San Diego police have turned over to the district attorney. The Bills' initial response Thursday night after the civil suit was filed, Bills issued a statement said they conducted a thorough examination of the allegations after they had recently learned about them and would not be commenting any further. Buffalo then played its final preseason game Friday on the road against the Panthers, eventually losing 21-0. As news of the lawsuit circulated, Bills faced mounting pressure and held Araiza out of the game despite his traveling with the team, arriving to Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. After the game, Bills coach Sean McDermott addressed the matter and said he didn't feel like it was right to play him. It's a matter of trying to find the truth. At the end of the day, McDermott added, that's the goal, is to find the truth and do the right thing. Find the truth to the best of my ability and to do the right thing. According to the victim's attorney, Daniel Gillian, Buffalo did not. They didn't do an investigation, Gillian told USA Today Sports on Friday. I mean, you can't investigate when you didn't even ask the primary witness what happened. These two people involved. You got to talk to both people. So this is, once again, why it became a controversy, because of the fact that they had a slow response to this. And that's very on brand with the NFL these days when players have these issues. Is slow responses infuriate the public at large and continuously make you feel like you haven't really learned from the previous instances. So Saturday evening, the Bills finally released Araiza 2 days after the civil suit was filed. The last 48 hours has been very difficult for a lot of people. It's been very tough. Buffalo Bills general manager said at a news conference Saturday, we sympathize with the whole situation, all the parties involved. This young woman, what she went through, you really feel bad for that whole situation. Ultimately, this is a legal situation. We don't know all the facts, but that's what makes it hard. That nearly went to the pray for the officers type talk. It got very, very close to that type of statement. But at the same time, we just think it's best for everyone to move on from that and let him take care of this situation and focus on that. So we're going to part ways here. So this is why the outrage started. Being admitted Saturday night, the franchise became aware of the allegations as early as July. Bean said he cannot recall whether Buffalo first learned of the accusations when Gillian, the victim's attorney, informed Buffalo's counsel in July, or the team heard about it from Araiza himself. Bean did stretch, however, that members of the Bills front office spoke to Araiza about the matter at around the time the victim's lawyer approached the franchise. So is college isn't in trouble, nor their football. That's weird how that works. With you would think that the NCAA would be having to answer to this, even though Araiza is no longer a college football player. Yeah, they could be decent. That light travel schedule should help them. And yes, as if the Bills haven't become dislikable enough. And this right here, if they were actually serious about this in some way, wouldn't he have been put on the exempt list back in July? I mean, Wouldn't that be the standard protocol? But no, they decided to hope that this would go away, a lot like the way that the Texans and Browns both hoped that it would go away with Deshaun Watson, although the Texans probably reacted a bit better than the Browns did, because the Browns actually gave him a huge ass contract when this shit wasn't completely resolved yet. In any case, Buffalo became at least aware of the allegations before they released the veteran punter Matt Hack on August 22nd, officially handing the job over. So another part of the incompetency is the team's counsel never really took it seriously enough to have a good discourse with them. I had one conversation with D'Angelo, Gillian said. Extended conversation. She didn't ask too many questions. I did a lot of the talking. She said she would get back to me. Never did. Then I followed up with her email to her saying, hey, 2 weeks ago you asked me, and you haven't. Still no reply ever. And that is a woman who is actually not responding seriously to an issue involving another woman. I'm guessing Araiza is hoping that there won't be another brown-eyed black-haired baby in 9 months. That could be true. Time will tell. But this is sad, the type of incompetence that the Buffalo Bills organization has. And this is very much in line with the Washington Commanders organization a couple years ago. You've got a general counsel who isn't taking this response seriously enough. And you wonder why the NFL continues to self-inflict itself with further more and more bad PR. They just barely recover from one scandal and they get themselves back in the mud with another one. Gillian blasted the Bills over their handling of Araiza's employment with the team, just hours after he had been released Saturday. The Buffalo Bills had no choice but to cut the punter after so badly punching their response to our claim. They ignored us as though what I warned them what would happen could be avoided. They just kept their heads in the sand. Gillian said in a statement provided to USA Today Sports, this is what enablers do. Very, very similar to the way that the institutional behavior in places like the Washington Commanders organization, the Dallas Mavericks organization, they had people inside there enabling that shit. And when you don't take this seriously, you enable it. And you condone the actions of rapists like Matt Araiza. My client's life was forever scarred in October 2021, but she handled herself with grace and dignity. Not once did she express to me a desire to hurt her assaulters out of revenge or hatred. Never asked for a pound of flesh. Her only ask was the kind of justice that might saved other young women from the hell she experienced. Has Araiza said anything about the matter? While he was still a member of the Bills, Drews held out of the expedition game against the Panthers. Araiza released a statement Friday in which he denied wrongdoing. The facts of the incident are not what they portrayed in the lawsuit or in the press. Said by his agent Joe Winta, I look forward to quickly setting the record straight. Then, after he was released Saturday, Araiza released another statement. This one through his attorney, Kerry Armstrong. Matt is very disappointed that his career ended with the Bills not because he played poorly, because of false accusations leveled against him by a young lady and her attorney. Armstrong wrote in a statement, I hope he is back in the NFL soon. He deserves to be, as he's the hardest 22-year-old I know. So, to sum things up, as we usually know with the stories that come out with sexual assault or harassment, that more than likely this is close to the truth. There may be small things that are off about this, but either way, even if things are slightly different than what was originally thought, that is still going to be things about the incident that will paint Araiza in a bad light, such as giving alcohol to a minor, having sexual intercourse with a minor, because I'm sure that the dispute will be whether it was rape or not, or consensual. And this is the problem that he's going to face over the past several months. WCSN, you kind of think an organization as big as the NFL would have some sort of vetting crew checking out records and plates. For as much as the NFL puts stock into their independent investigations, you would think that they'd have an independent institution for when individual teams don't seriously respond to the issues. Oh, the hat? The Joker, of course. The back-to-back MVP. Doing yoke-like things for the Serbian national team right now. I mean, that was on Thursday, that was a great head-to-head battle with Giannis as Serbia beat Greece in overtime. But yeah, I'm definitely very excited for what this next Nuggets season could be. My feelings are they finally got the right pieces in place to finally be the 1 seed. But yeah, most of the time on stream, I normally wear the hat backwards, so you don't get to see what's on front. But yes, it's definitely a lot of unseriousness at the hands of a lot of the NFL. They keep repeating these same mistakes when it comes to dealing with these things. And that's what happens when you have teams that don't have like a unified response to these things. And the truth is, if it's anything, I think since, let's be honest, I think that this is going to be some type of indictment towards this punter Araiza. And I don't think that it may not, and it probably won't be like the punishment he absolutely deserves, to be honest. But I think as long as the details that come out show that the truth does lie mainly towards the accuser in the situation, I do believe that this could be a thing that could ruin Araiza's football career, especially when you're only a punter. I mean, they don't grow on trees per se, but it's also one of the least important positions in football as well. So that's going to make things worse for you when you play a position that is non-essential and you do something like that. Punters, kickers, running backs, 3 of the wide receivers, even though a lot of them get paid handsomely, they're pretty low on the essential position total pool. Well, if you're a quarterback, you may have a chance to get back into the NFL a few years later if you do have a worse outcome of that shit. But it's just another week of the NFL watching through a disastrous PR response, full on typical NFL brand. So thanks so much to everyone coming out tonight for tonight's episode of the Rochford Files. Side note, hi to Crystal, a Chicago Bulls fan. Colorado State at number 8 Michigan Saturday early. I'm not really a college football guy, but I don't care that much. But probably both games are going to be pretty ugly. Just because Colorado football is really weak right now, and the whole state is real weak at the moment. I don't doubt that athletes are targeted by nefarious William. They need to be extra careful, not getting rapey or punchy. We know. I mean, it was fortunate that Trevor Bauer managed to settle on his case, and that turned out to not be worse for him. But they need to definitely become much more responsible. Basic thing is like consent, very big. And if you're not getting consent, then that's going to make things dangerous, even if you're ending up just doing something that's much more vanilla in comparison to like gang rape or like kink stuff, where you start to apply pain. So that's the fine line that you have to toe when you're a rich man in this country, because you're in risk of crossing that line one moment, one night, and that could be your career right there. And the responsibility needs to definitely be much more stronger when you're in that position. But yeah, thanks so much to all of you for joining me tonight on the Rochford Files with your host, Andrew Rochford, including the Twitch trolls as well. But I do need to become more consistent on this. Also, which would mean I would need to be ready to do a show next on Tuesday or Wednesday. Click the link tree below in the description for all the platforms for the Rochford Files. If you haven't liked the stream yet, please click that and share on your way out. Apologies, Kelly. Much love to Mom. She won't my dogs. I'm sorry I don't talk loud enough to cover that up. I'm not like a overpowering voice per se. I mean, I have my moments, but see, I can't even fake it well. But with that being said, this is Andrew Rochford saying goodbye and good night, and see y'all later in the week.